Hey guys, we are day 99 in our Bible reading plan, Deuteronomy 16 through 18 and Psalm 99. And we're in Deuteronomy and making our way through the sermon, and now we're hitting some laws. So for the next few chapters, you're going to be like, oh man, are we doing this again? So how do we focus our minds when it gets like this? I think you ask the Lord to lead you to some verses that stick out, and to understand sort of his heart behind it. So you start seeing things like there's some themes in the reading that stuck out to me. As an example, a sentence, the Lord your God will choose. I noticed it in chapter 16 a few times, and I noticed it again in chapter 18. And so you might ask God, like, what is, like, think about that the Lord chooses for us where we live, how we live, what we celebrate, how we celebrate. The other thing, there was a few things that sort of were highlighted in my mind too. What God hates, he says there are forbidden forms of worship that he hates, and at the end of chapter 16 and at the beginning of chapter 17. And so you start to ask yourself, who is God? As you're reading the Bible, you want to find out who God is, what he's like. Because it's so easy to get bogged down with, like, really, do I need to know what the future king of Israel ought to be? But even in that, you find out in chapter 17, like that God wants whoever is in control in Israel to be under the laws of God. He says, you hold on to the book. He says, don't acquire many wives. They distract you from the main thing. And by the way, they did not listen to that later. Solomon had 700 wives, but that's another story. But the idea of life as they settled in the land was going to be full of temptations to live like the people of the land. So a lot of the laws that are given is to protect against what would be so easily things that they could pick up by the ways of the land, and God's ways were different. And so in marrying other wives, they would be exposed to the teachings of other gods, which is what eventually happened. And not to acquire a lot of gold, because you could become dependent on money as opposed to depending on God. And so those are the type of things that you start seeing. Now, a couple of pit stops in chapter 16, verse 1. This idea of observing the month of Abib, best month of the year, April, my birthday month, and keep the Passover to the Lord your God, for in the month of Abib, the Lord your God brought you out of Egypt by night. This idea of remembering your salvation, remembering the day that God brought them out of Egypt, is so critical. That's what we do when we practice the Lord's Supper at church. If you don't go to a church that regularly has the Lord's Supper, you're missing out, because that is what causes us to stop and remember as you're going through difficulties, as you're going through joys, all of the things, to remember that you have been saved and what the purpose of your life is and what the values of your life are. Another little observation, chapter 17, verse 1. You shall not sacrifice to the Lord your God an ox or a sheep in which is a blemish, any defect, whatever, for that is an abomination to the Lord your God. God wanted a pure and perfect offering to God, and God hates that. The abomination is such a big word. It's an awful word, and it's not a small thing to offer God less than your best. And it's easy to cut corners in our worship and to try to go for what is less expensive to us, less costly to us. And so let's think about that. Are we remembering where we came from? And are we offering God a worship of our bodies, of our minds, of our time, of our ways that is worthy of him? I wrote this for the big idea, focusing on the Passover and the feasts in chapter 16. Our joy is such a priority to God that he commands us to feast, because he knows that left ourselves, we become joyless and exhausted. So think about that today.